Okay. Hi, everybody. It is 12:02. Thank you for being here. We'll call this meeting to order. And if we will, let's take the roll. Mr. Barnwell. Mr. Barnwell. Can they hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay. It looks like he's connecting to audio.
I'll come back to Mr. Barnwell.
Okay.
Mr. Brennan.
Present.
Burgess.
Present.
Beaton. I'm on the phone. Ms. Herbert. Representative Howard. Dr. Marks.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Racio.
Here.
Mr. Unthank. Mr. Walker. After you have a quorum.
Thank you. It looks like Mr. Barnwell is still connecting to audio. I want to make sure he can hear us as we start to move forward. Should we text?
And I'm sorry. Did you call the advisory members?
Oh, no, we could call the advisory members.
Yes, advisory members. Kane. Mr. Green.
I'm here.
Ms. Mood. Ms. Robinson. Ms. Summers.
No, he just moved over.
We got you.
Okay, so Ms. Lee.
Mr. Barnwell, can you hear us now?
Call. Okay, but can we like approve the agenda? Okay.
We moved to the presentation. That's information only, right?
Okay. Okay. So while we're waiting for Mr. Barnwell to connect to audio, we will move past anything that requires a vote. And we will move on to, thank you, item 6, the presentation by Warner Transportation. Thank you for being here.
Okay, let me just
Yes, Mr. Durst.
Oh, do we want Mr. Durst to speak first?
Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Could we have the Midlands Transit Riders Association update, which is a 2-minute, up to 2 minutes. Oh, thank you. And Mr. Smith is here. Okay, great.
Smith, is he can come.
Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Smith, if you want to go ahead and take your seat, and we have called to order, but we have not been able to adopt the agenda yet. Is there a motion regarding the agenda? Yes.
Executive section to the presentation. Yes, in 3 days.
And move to after 6.
After 6. So
Let's see what happened. Yeah, that's okay. So is that your motion? Okay. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. So with that update, we'll take the roll to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Barnwell. Mr. Brennan.
Yes.
Mr. Burgess. Ms. Gleaton. Yeah. Ms. Herbert. Representative Howard, Dr. Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Racio,
Yes.
Unthank, Mr. Walker. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 3, the consent calendar. 3A is the approval of the August 28th board minutes on pages 3 through 6. 3B is the submission of the invoice check registers on pages 7 through 15. Is there a motion regarding the consent agenda? Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, we'll call the roll to approve the consent calendar.
Mr. Barnwell, Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Burgess,
Yes.
Ms. Gleaton. Ms. Herbert. Representative Howard, Dr. Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Racio,
Yes.
Mr. Unthank, and Mr. Walker. Motion carries.
Thank you. Now that brings us to item 4, our Midlands Transit Riders Association. Sorry for the shuffling that happened. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank the for fixing the problems at Transit Center. 2 or 3 years too late, but it could still. Thank you for doing that. I want to talk about the meetings that Mr. Pearl is having at the libraries, at Richland Libraries. I went to the one at St. Andrews, and I just want to say that board members really should take an interest in maybe going to that and interacting with the writers and those that are attending those meetings. I think it would be helpful. It was very interesting and very informative. And I must say too, that there was a question regarding penny tax. And Mr. Pearl was reluctant to say anything due to legal reasons. And because I was there, I was able to talk about the penny tax. And because I'm not under the same restraints that others are. And impressed upon them the need to pass that. So if you've got friends or neighbors that go to that meeting and that you know, maybe your wives or your husbands, you go there and make that case against sort of that. The other thing is tomorrow and Friday, we know that there's going to be bad weather. Tom has been very good about informing the riders if there's an interruption in service, and I stress that that needs to be done as well in case there is a situation. Because on the Weather Channel, they say it's coming this way. Our local weather say it's going to Tennessee, so nobody knows. I'm just saying, please do that.
We appreciate the comment. We've actually started internal conversations regarding that this morning. So we started that this morning, and we'll make sure that the public is advised for whatever service interruptions that there could be out there.
Okay, thanks very much.
Mr. Durst, I'd like for you to use your influence to see if you can get a shelter at Window and 2 nights repair. I've been trying for several months here at the board meeting, but since you have an inside track, I better put that on your Window and 2 nights.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now it will be the call to the public, and I'll just say thank you for your flexibility. My best friend has in her emails, blessed are the flexible, so or they will not be bent out of shape. So that brings us to 2 minutes to those who signed up. I have Mr. Tom Clements.
Real estate.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to speak. My name is Tom Clements. I'm a resident of Earlwood, just right up the hill, adjacent to the transit center and the ill-constructed bus transfer facility, which I'm going to talk about. I have a master's degree in forest resources from the University of Georgia, so I have some graduate education in environmental matters, including hydrology and soils. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I support the mission of the Transit Authority, by the way, just to underscore my comment. Since approximately March 2022, I've been closely observing what was happening across the street. And you can read my statement for more details. You may see a guy riding with a long sleeve yellow shirt on his bicycle. I go by the facility twice a day, almost every day of the year. So I have stopped and talked with people and I've watched what's going on. It was obvious from day one that something was askew with the project. As no notice was present at the site concerning an opportunity for public comment, then as far as I'm aware, no environmental report about what was about to take place was provided to the public. At least I didn't know about it. At that point, the issue of groundwater flow should have been recognized as the site is downhill from the higher ground up on River Drive, adjacent to where I live. Then the clear cutting of all the trees, bushes, and plants started and the real trouble began. Massive runoff of water and mud from the site took place into the beleaguered stream adjacent to the site. Silt fences were torn down. The water retention pond was mal-designed and overflowed water and mud into the streets. It seemed as if the contractor and Comet didn't care. I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. Nothing happened to stop that environmental degradation that was going on. Before the project was shut down due to the runoff issues, it was obvious that the site disturbance was poorly designed and inadequately monitored. So I've got a series of questions before I close here.
Mr. Clements, that is 2 minutes. We do have your letter, and we will make copies for the rest of the board members and circulate those. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do want people to read these questions, and I'll be closely monitoring this as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a copy of this for anyone who might want it.
Thank you. That brings us to item 6. Now it's our presentation by Warner Transportation. Just the one. We just had one sign up. Okay.
Hang on, start show from beginning. There we go. There we go. Okay. So this is, I want to go and talk about the key issue here, been of interest to the board and others in Columbia, dealing with the bus lineup at Comet Central. But let me put this in context here. This is part of a broader study we're doing, looking at on-time performance, the service analysis, the service needs, the service potential, the full market analysis of the area, and what that means in terms of route alignment changes, schedule changes, what we can do to make the service operate more efficiently and more productively. And all of the pieces that we're talking, all of those elements, that part of the analysis, and I'll go into some of the details about that further in the presentation, but they will feed into this part here about what to do about Comet Central with the lineup and what are the different options. But I want to go in, so that's sort of the general sort of outline of where this stands. And I'll describe the methods and the path we're going to be using to evaluate them. So here's really what we're talking about with this. Let's see if I can do the explain. Oh, here we go. These are the two lineups you have now at Comet Central. At the 45 to 50, you have 8 of the buses that line up the main trunk routes, your O1s, 1 in the hourly radials, the 11, and then the soda cap route 4, which is a small circulator downtown. The soda cap 1 and 2, they are also going around downtown, but they don't actually show up at Comet Central. They're a couple blocks over to the west. But the big lineup is right around the 15 after the hour. This is when the 14 buses show up. You've got all of the O1 series, plus the 7 hourly radials and the soda cap 4. So that's your big lump there. But the key thing here is that, and I want to really emphasize to start off with, why does CMRTA do a lineup at all? Why is there this concentration of all these buses? Let's just take a minute. Well, they do it essentially for the same reason that every other transit agency does it, or most of the similar sized transit agencies. And the key thing, there are two big reasons. But the key one is your transportation, your transit demand is no longer related to a monocentric city. There is still a lot of demand downtown. And these are trip patterns taken from the farebox data that I was able to go and glean here. This is where the ends are. This is not the University of South Carolina, but you see you have a lot of these people going into downtown. You also have a lot of other group of riders at the University of South Carolina. And this, by the way, over here is from the apartments over here to the journalism building, which is by far the biggest OD there by like 1,000 times, back and forth 1,000,000 times. But you see, it's actually compared to that city profile, it's pretty dense. You know, it's not people going all around the area going into University of South Carolina, it's within the campus itself. And that's a really kind of a distinct set of routes that Comet serves. But rather, it's the everywhere to everywhere. And it's all over the place. So this is the real reason why you need a hub, why you have a lineup at all. 45 and 15, these buses come in here, they come to a common point, and it allows people to make these trips. So if you didn't have some place to make all these transfers, then your transit system really wouldn't be as effective. It wouldn't provide the accessibility that the community needs. So that's one part of it. That's why you need a central spot here. And this does show that Comet Central, relative to the service area, these represent the routes, is a central spot. But there's another piece to it for doing the lineup. That's why you need a central hub. But the lineup is also essential because you can only afford to run one bus an hour for all of your radial routes. The other ones go half an hour, and when your service levels are that infrequent, if you don't have some place where all the buses come together regularly, where people can make their easy transfers, they're not gonna be able to make their trips. They're not gonna take 20 minutes coming in from the northeast, coming in from Coonacody, coming in from Saddlewood, coming in on the 401 to try and get up to the Mall of Harbison. If they now have to wait 45 minutes for the next bus. So they can't, that's the value of having a hub at all. And so Comet Central, that's the key piece for that. But what would you do about it? If you didn't want to have that hub, what I want to talk about is several options here. And one option, of course, is, well, move the line someplace else. And that, of course, was the basis for the reason for considering River and Lucius. And that was an idea. You can put all your bays, you can have all the buses line up. It's not going to be interfering, it's off the street. Comet could control the access there. But it had a lot of other operational issues too that really were things that undermined a little bit of the value for that as a hub and emphasize again why Comet Central was a particular positive thing. The downtown, remember all those trips, all those points going into downtown? That was destinations. Those were not people transferring. Those are people whose trip end was in the downtown. So around that area, just north of the university, but in this square here, that's where all those trips were coming into. There were a lot of them. You know, a few people are coming to this building, but River and Lucius is not really serving anything. You want the hub, you want the super stop to have some destination, some reason for going there in the first place. The other piece too is that if you pull all of these routes or a big chunk of them, you pull this knot of routes up to Comet Central, well then so much of your ridership is to the southeast. The rest of it's to the east. You have a chunk coming up here, not so much out in West Columbia. But if you pull all these people who were looking to make those connections to go everywhere to everywhere, they're going to have 10 minutes more on their trip. And these guys, the 84 and the 801 bus, maybe 6, won't be an add-on, but all these other ones will be taking 10 minutes more to go up Main, to go up River and Lucius, to go up River to go up Lucius to get up to there. And that's 10 minutes more of additional service that Comet would have to operate. And then to go back on their route, so if the 401 is coming up here, it's got to go through downtown and then go back out. That's another 20 minutes on the route that you would have to operate. So that's a big factor in terms of time. And again, it's one of the drawbacks there that you would have that too. So those were some of the shortcomings that you really wanted to deal with too. But is there another place to do that? Well, let me just go back to this one. Is there another spot to put it someplace? You know, if it was closer into downtown on the west side of town, that would be ideal because it would, you know, you want to break it up here, because then these routes are still going through downtown. They're coming over here, but they're not going all this much further up. But let's consider that that isn't a possibility for a new route. And all of the routes weren't going to do that. They weren't all going to go up to River Lucius, by the way. There was also going to be an additional circulator put in place. But then some of the routes were going to end up here. The 701 is going to terminate here at Common Central. And that these people, if they're going up to Dutch Square, or going up to River Lucius, going up to Midlands Tech, up to Harbison, are going to have to take a 3-seat ride if they were to go up there under this analysis. But let's take a look at some other options here too. If we took the current routes with the drop and go, that is where the buses are not lining up. This is at 15, this is at 8:15, but it gets repeated at 9:15. Your big lineup, if they're not going to be lining up over here, all of these buses took a departure. Can the buses still come in to Common Central, drop off their passengers, go someplace else, and then come back in time to pick them up again for the lineup? Well, it's kind of the same drawback too. And there are, not so much in the United States, but outside of the US, a lot of agencies do have that process that where their tradition is more to just not have the bus operators stick around and do their layovers at the downtown hub or any other hub, but they go someplace else. They hide out for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and they come back and pick them up. But again, that requires that there has to be some other place that is accessible. That's not, otherwise, if they're going someplace long distance, that's again, miles and hours that CMRTA is paying for, but they're unproductive miles and hours. The other thing that's important here is to recognize that, well, these are your departures. This is the time the buses show up. Your arrivals are all over the place. So a really neat, tight pulse schedule where all the buses come in, everybody scurries around between one bus and another. Other agencies do it in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Comet has, these are scheduled times. So all these routes over here, and this is when they show up. So this gap over here is 21 minutes between when this bus, I think that's the 401, yeah, the 401 shows up and when the 401 leaves. So it's nice to have a facility at Common Central because your people, the bus riders are hanging out. They're waiting a long time for their next route. So this does sort of allow some potential there, but even then, if you were going to go and have the buses just drop off under this circumstance, under this option, to go someplace else, they still would have to do it very quickly. So this is the 21 minutes. That's an example of that. So that's the blow up there of that now from 7:45 to 8:30, but this gets repeated throughout the day. There's minor variations in the afternoon. But you see, this is when anybody translating, these guys over here, what's that? Is that the 42? The 11 is even earlier. These guys they're still waiting like half an hour. So there are some benefits of a pulse that are being lost to that, but we'll get back to that. Oh, and then there's this question, well, where would bus operators hide if you were to have them drop off someplace? And I don't know. I mean, they could park all over the place because it's no longer looking for a hub for passengers. It's just a hub for buses and bus operators, or not a hub, but someplace where they could go to and get back. But even I looked at that, well, here's this newly paved area by Page Ellington Park. Even it's 7 minutes for the round trip. It's too long. You couldn't really do it. I was gonna skip that one, but that was just an off-street facility. That's an idea of it. So anyway, here's another option. Drop the 14 bus lineup at the 15:20, that departure time. And I don't mean eliminate the lineup, but look at some other options you can do with it too. Here are a couple of options. So replace the 3 of them, take that one. And here's one for a 3 bus lineup. So what I've done here is all those radials, all the main trunk routes, the 01s that used to show up. Remember, it was the 45 and the 15. These get moved down to, these get broken out. So now you have the 01s and the Soda Cap 4, which really isn't a big transfer hub for these, but it's just a half-hourly route. These just go, that should have said 30, the 0 and the 30, and this is a 15 in the middle. Now, this has the advantage of breaking that big lineup of buses. It's no longer 14 buses showing up at Comet Central around the 15 or the 20. And it allows you have plenty of room here for small buses, but it does mean that people transferring from a local bus to an 01 bus or from an 01 bus back to a local bus are going to have a wait. They're going to be like 21 minutes. If these guys do show up 6 minutes before the 0, if they show up at 54 after the hour, and then to leave at the 0, these guys getting in here from the 01s won't leave until the 15 on the local. And likewise, if these people coming in on these locals come in at the 09, they're not going to leave until the 30. So again, 21 minutes. But there are still advantages here. So this is, and its advantages, what's wrong way? Its advantages because of this, because this big, long gap, all of this space here between the arrivals and the departures, that if you were to take, let's see, page now. If you were to, so this is the same time period, but this says, okay, if you were to be able to fit this, and to do this requires some of the other parts of what we're talking about in our study, the route rationalization, cutting unproductive segments where the bus is taking a detour and nobody gets on or off, changing some of the schedules and then rationalizing some other parts of the lines. And then you have to do some strategic sort of slowing where it's necessary, but you can do this where you can cut the lineup and not cut the lineup, but you can get the travel time in a way that does allow you to come up with a very sort of a well-defined, well-operating pulse. And the key thing about this is going from here to there, even though you've now added this additional travel time, or additional wait time, I mean, between the local buses and the expresses, one way or the other, because the pulse is so much tighter, you end up providing some savings. So, and this is just, if you look at this route to route, what the difference in wait time is in Comet Central, it saves significantly, but what you really want is like, well, who's on it? If one of these buses at an additional 9 minutes, if everybody's transferring between those two, well, you've added 9 minutes to a big group of travelers, which is not positive. But if we go and then take a look at the travel patterns, the transfers to Comet Central, and then you can see that the 01s, and this is of course partly because, well, these are going twice a day, twice an hour, all of these transfers between the 01s, that those buses, those travelers that are waiting for 20 minutes, they get to wait for only 6 minutes. It's a net positive. And this connection score is just taking all of those travelers over the course of the day, times the wait time over what you have, and this plan B is with a smaller pulse. With the tighter pulse here. And this is this connection score. You can cut the lineup in half, no added hours or miles, and then there's more in terms of rationalizing routes there, but cumulative passenger time dropped by 18%. But wasn't the only, okay, net savings, this is the particular route-to-route pairs. And this is the even better one here. That was with 3 lineups before. If you could get those 01 buses, if you had to run a 3rd trip each hour, well, then the wait is much shorter. So that tightens it even further. So this is now, you have a 3rd one of the 6 buses in the 01 series. Somewhere the other soda cap 4 comes back in over here in between them. But you could do this. You could clear the buses at Comet Central during that time and cut the routes that way too, cut the lineup that shows up. But the other piece here is that these buses would have to operate, and most of them are set up, most of your routes are set up on hours, so they wouldn't have, you could do it. The 801, which is a longer route, is a little bit tricky because it wouldn't fit neatly into this pattern, but that's an option. Is a 6-minute layover doable? Well, longer layover recovery at the other end. So there might be some operational issues to deal with that, finding an attractive spot for that. Some endpoint changes. Kuhn and Cody is sort of a kind of desolate there. That's an endpoint for 301 and the 101. make some other changes to that. Is there another spot which serves more food line up there? Strategic go slows where necessary to make sure that you're not showing up while other buses are still at Comet Central. Real-time monitoring route modifications, which is part of what we're doing too. This last one here, in terms of options, this is one though that is the key thing that we're working on. And this is to say, what if it was a pass through at Comet Central? Buses still come into downtown, people can still make transfers there. But remember, the need for that transfer hub in the first place was because you needed a central hub and your buses on some of yours are only running once an hour. But if the buses were running more frequently, if you could get these trunk routes, these main routes, not even going all the way out, not even the 801, but if you took these at a shorter spot, and some of these are changed. This is the Walmart neighborhood center over here and the Target are not currently endpoints, but they're better than the old Kmart spot, a half mile, because it's, yes, again, you want your hubs to be destinations in themselves. And likewise over here, we've got the Whole Foods, but the Target just a half mile down is a better spot there. It is a destination itself, somewhere up here in the Northeast. But if you could get these main trunks, and these are just lines that I've drawn temporarily, I'll get to the reason why in a moment. If you could get these to run at even 20-minute frequency, they're shorter routes, and the rest of these routes, the locals, would just serve in here and then they are pulsed. You could run a much more efficient service. There would be no need for a lineup at all. No buses are waiting at Comet Central. They're just pulling in. Buses every 20 minutes means that within a 10-minute or so wait, you can get on the bus that you want. So our sense is that with the route rationalization we're doing in the rest of this study, with that assessment of the service needs and the service potential, that this is something that can work, coming up with this. And it also allows for a different type of service, a multimodal options of outlawing hubs. Up here, you've got a couple of pieces here where the ridership is very poor, and it may be something that's more suited for a microtransit type operation rather than fixed route. So that's something that we'll go over later on, but but that's one of the ideas here too about this is where you can have these local routes feeding into these hubs, and then you have frequent trunk service. And all of these other local routes, when you've got the 88 that serves a couple of these, it's low ridership, that would be more difficult to coordinate. But the other routes here, we can set this up in a way that they feed in and they're on schedule. They can connect readily to one of these buses that then goes in through Comet Central and then comes out the other end and goes someplace else. So I mentioned again that that's part of our study. Well, this is the rest of our study. This is part of what we've been doing. That's obviously part of the study. This is the rest. Understanding transit need. This is the one where you're talking about low-income populations, disabled, teenagers, youth, non-drivers, elderly. And then looking at transit potential, this is one of recognizing density of population and activities, and jobs. So where there is potential, where we should be doing that, recognizing other key transit generators. This is community centers, multi-unit housing, apartment buildings, supermarkets, the type of things that would be attractive, where we would look at the routes and say, this is where we want to go and serve. And of course, ridership. Here we go. And this is one of understanding, well, where are your current riders now? What is a stop that needs to be served? And then we get down to the trip routes as well. And from this, so this is the other two. So we've just finished these route profiles. This is a route by route analysis, looking at all of these, looking at the market analysis, looking at the route, identifying weaknesses, strengths, and opportunities for these individual route pieces. And from this, so we've just finished all of those, and we've got all the seeds. We have a sense now of where there's opportunities here to go and make the service more productive, make some changes, make it more efficient, and then see if we can recognize, are there opportunities here for doing these trunks, making these changes, keeping it on schedule, building the schedules, laying it all on the table, see what we've got, and then coming up with an alternative plan that would be able to meet these goals for that option 4. So that was it. Where was that? For this one, for making this one work. Oops. That's not my screen. There it is. No, that's not either. Okay. There it is. Okay. But anyway, this is what we're doing here. This has been part of this full study. Normally, this type of essentially a comprehensive operational analysis would go on for a year. We're 3 months, and I think we've got 2 more weeks. And really, and this is we're talking about going through schedules, working closely with Vince, with Jackie, with Reese, to see, does this work? Here are recommendations. Anyway, that's where we're at.
I have a question.
Sure.
Why are we still using the pulsing concept?
Well, the 2 reasons that I gave, that the one about you have infrequent service is the key one here. And that this is something that pretty much every American transit agency of the size of Comet tries to do this. It's a convenience to your riders. That's the key thing.
But pulsing doesn't fit into our new concept in a moment, does it?
He's a professional.
I have a question. I heard you talk about some of these 1 hour routes. And you would say it'd be much more efficient if you had 20 minutes route. Wouldn't that cost us more buses?
Well, that would. My sense is, though, that we're not talking about, I mean, you've got the hourly routes and you have the 30-minute routes, the O1s. And really what I'm talking about with these cutting down to 20 minutes are the O1s. That these would be trunks, and many of these, like this little segment over here, this would be right over here. This is a little segment of the 11. It gets very little ridership. You can serve this, and you have the 301. You still have this one coming in here. This is Cody and Coon. So if you had, and this is just coming in here, and this route goes here. But again, these were just lines I drew on here. That even going from 30 minutes to 20 minutes would be more hours and miles. But it is our sense, myself and Board Palchik, who've been working with me on this, that there is enough opportunity for removing some unproductive segments. And many of these local routes that are going in, all the way out, from the, from every direction here into downtown, these are your alley routes that they don't need to go into town. If they can get to one of these hubs and you have a quick, efficient pulsed operation, they get an improved service because now they have higher frequency. They can get there and then in 20 minutes, if it's every 20 minutes, they can catch a ride. And given that there is all of these routes, all of the feeder routes would be timed to pulse at these points over here. So that would be, they could do that, but they wouldn't, those local routes would not be going into downtown. So with the mileage and hours saved on those, it would offset any additional miles and hours that would go for these trunk routes through the downtown. So that's, and they'd just be going through. There'd be no need to lay over or have a big lineup at Comet Central because with 20-minute frequencies, that's right at the cusp. If you can do 15 minutes, even better. For 20 minutes, it's not so bad. And given the raggedness of the pulse now at Comet Central, that too would be a big improvement.
But you didn't answer the question. Would we need more buses if you add the 15 to 20 minutes frequency?
Oh, okay, sorry. My sense is no, you wouldn't. For those routes, yes. Service from Dutch Square down to the Target, that would be going up, but it would be offset by route savings elsewhere. When we look at the routes, we can see a lot of areas for rationalization, service where you're running buses and nobody's getting on. There's just, even the little Route 4 that goes in here, there's this little detour out here. I can't remember what the building is that's on the far west side of that, but there's running buses every half hour. It's a little segment over here. Nobody ever gets on or off. There are segments out here too. There's a stretch out here past the 32 where also nobody's getting on. There are parts of the Saddlewood service too, but other pieces as well. And then you have certain loops that we'd be how to go and serve this somewhat more efficiently. But we recognize that that is a constraint. There's a fixed amount of resources that CMRTA has. What are the hours and miles that we can fit within that constraint? And we see it. We looked at this closely and we thought, yeah.
So that route savings inventory, that is part of this process where we can take one bus and put it to a new use.
Well, our original charge, it wasn't even originally looking at just cutting the lineup at Comet Central. It was a broader, more comprehensive analysis. And doing the types of analysis studies that a transit planning consultant would do, usually in a much longer time frame. But one piece of that, one effect of it, is that we also recognize these options for reducing the lineups and how best to serve downtown. And recognizing just like, you know, I could see what you were doing with River and Lucius. But it's also was just.
So you're gonna look at it for 2 more weeks, get back with staff to look at the effects. If it's something that staff wants to move forward, you'll come back. What's the timeline if we do want to put this into action for actual implementation?
Well, the implementation, given that we are talking about, this would get to the point of being a significant type of change. And when something has a significant enough type of change, it would have to go through a public hearing process. So you'd have to have public meetings to go and convey this, to go and bring it up, lay out the plans, and then, the first step would be operationally. Are these travel times that we have, when we look at the travel times, and I was working with Central Midlands MPO to get their peak hour travel times to, are they right? Is there something about this left turn? And there are things that throw you off. One traffic light can add 4 minutes. You know, you get stuck behind that and that's it. So you need to build in the time. So there's field testing that goes in with all of this. Taking a bus out, this is just too tight. We just cannot take a full-size bus in this loop that you've suggested. And then if you're talking about a new hub, I like this. There's a Walmart neighborhood center that's a much better destination for your hub than the old Kmart a little bit further south. The Target is a better spot here. But even then, you're dealing with, you're not just on public streets at that point if you're turning around in a parking lot. Well, we need to find out, is that in fact feasible with the landowner? So
just give me a number. Give me a timeline.
Oh, okay. Well, for all of that, before something would be able to get done? 6 months? What is the process for scheduling the public meetings? That's what we're talking about. But our recommendations, we're not even in October yet, but our recommendations will be, within the next 2 weeks or so, 2 or 3 weeks. And then it gets down to working, let's do some running it by the planning staff, the operations staff here at CMRTA. And seeing, and the other one too is there something, is the ATU, is that the union that you're working with the operators? Does the ATU have any problems with this as a concept or this particular layover point?
So, and this option 4 could still exist if the Comet looks to have another larger transit intermodal center in the future.
Well, are you talking about with like intercity bus you're referring to? Well, you've got, one thing that we did notice too was that where we've got the Greyhound up around here. Is that where the Greyhound is?
And I'm talking about a large transit center at a different location, wherever that location.
Oh, that's great. Is it in downtown?
To be determined. But I guess my point is that the buses at Sam's Club, Target, Walmart, Dutch Square, they're not stopping at a main transit center with this concept. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're referring to, but
to Mr. Burgess's point, it is the board's desire to grow to a larger intermodal center somewhere, most likely downtown, right? How does the effectiveness of this solution work into the broader transportation plan that the comment would like to do?
Well, I hadn't been aware of that, but before you would make any significant change, I guess you'd really want to know what is the timeline for that. Whereas, I mean, buses are not fixed rail. They can go any place. The Common Central, of course, is a facility and where there's plenty of seats for people to wait and you have curbs, but that's something to build an intermodal system. I mean, even that, if you're really at just a really conceptual planning stage, that's still something that's way out in the future anyway. So it doesn't, my sense is that this could go ahead and then
That's what I was
make a
getting at.
change later on
All right, thank you.
as these new plans materialize.
I appreciate it.
Other questions from the board? And I don't see anybody's hand up on screen, but we don't have anybody, right? I just want to double check myself.
No, I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Quick question, maybe more of a comment, and this would be for staff to take into consideration as we as a board consider something like this. The thing that I would love to see is if a similarly situated transit authority undertook this change, what the implications were for riders. I look at this and I think, yeah, I can see the times are shortened. You can maybe go from this point to this point without going to downtown. But it also looks more complicated. So if I'm a rider who just wants to get downtown from one of these outskirts, but now have to go through another transit point that maybe my bus requires me to get on another bus that is going downtown, where before I didn't have to do that. I'd like to kind of think through the implications of adding that kind of complexity to a system, particularly, I think, from the rider standpoint.
That's a really good point. I mean, typically for these much longer types of comprehensive operational analysis, we would have the opportunity to go and run these concepts by the public at public meetings with a questionnaire or a survey online. If you had a choice of this higher frequency with a 2-seat ride, whereas you now have a 1-seat ride now, would you do it? And by the way, the point of these is beyond these little spots here, that's where the density drops down, your sidewalk connectivity drops down. It gets harder for people to get to a bus stop. And when you look at the ridership, with a couple of exceptions up here at the Walmart Harbison, in this whole area around Harbison too. This is here where you connect out to the 76, where you have, there would be an opportunity to do that. Furthermore, we can only look now at when we're doing this analysis, part of the metrics we're using to compare one alternative to another is your current ridership. This is revealed action. It's not, oh, sure, oh, that would be great. We can see the population that's in now a quarter mile of every bus stop. We can get a sense from the census, we can get a sense of if somebody is looking to get out to McIntyre Produce, how would, and they're coming from up here at Harbison or someplace else in your area, how would they get there and what would be their travel time? Are they better off? And then transportation planners also recognize that a wait time is typically, to make a connection, is often useful sort of measure of thumb is 3 times the in-vehicle time is the perceived disutility, so the negative quality of having to wait for a bus. Except there have been plenty of other cases that have shown that where you really do have effective transit connections, that where it is right there. I mean, the ultimate one was a train service, where your train comes in here, there's the next connecting train on the other side of the platform. And that's really easy. This one doesn't quite have that. I mean, Common Central has that nice feature. You don't have to walk between buses. You don't even have to cross the street. It's all on the same side of Laurel and Sumter. But this is one where we do see from other experiences that an effective feeder service can work from the perspective of the riders. I can look to go and get more specific examples of that and arrange to share that with Common and to get that to you as well. Thanks.
I don't see anything further. Thank you so much. And so, we will probably hear from you, again at perhaps the next meeting. Is that what we're,
How long does the board meet?
we, once a month?
Oh, okay. Well, I will leave it up to, I will work with CMRTA to find out. Because again, as I mentioned, it is something where it will still require some operational assessments within CMRTA to make sure that all of this is something that, and if it doesn't work, well, we go back to the drawing board. You know, we'll make sure that we get it right here and can be a maximum utility to the agency.
Thank you. Well, you've given us a lot to think about, and I took a lot of notes, so hopefully we'll have some good discussions between now and the next opportunity. Okay, that will bring us to item 7, our discussion. Oh, sorry, that brings us to the new item 7, which is executive session. So unlike usual board meetings, we'll have most folks will leave, and then we'll have folks need to come back for the rest of the agenda. So hopefully we will not keep you off. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. We need a motion to go to executive session. Sorry. Moved and seconded. I will take the vote.
Mr. Barnwell. Mr. Brennan.
Yes.
Mr. Farkas. Ms. Slayton. Ms. Herbert. Representative Howard.
Yes.
Dr. Barnes. Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Racio.
Yes.
Mr. Umthang. Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Carries.
Thank you all. Thank you. So we are out of executive session. Okay. That there's no action was taken. And we'll move on to now what is item 8, our discussion and action items. So 8A is our service update. Oh,
Second.
I guess you can't, that's one of the motions, no discussions, no discussion. Okay, we'll take the vote to adjourn.
Madam Chair.
Dr. Morris, we can't discuss it. We just have to vote it up or down.
Well, if you have a question on any motion?
With the motion. Not for adjournment. So it's non-debatable. So we'll just have to vote it up or down and then move on. Okay, we'll take the vote.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Barnwell, Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Burgess,
Yes.
Ms. Slayton, Ms. Herbert, Representative Howard.
Good.
Dr. Barnes, Mr. Smith. Racio,
No.
Umthang, Mr. Walker.
Okay, and I see on the screen, Mr. Roosevelt said yes through the chat. The motion passes. Okay, stand adjourned. Thank you.